Signalis is a weird freaking game. Going in, I expected to have a blast, but instead I emerged with lots of existential dread and a weird fascination for lesbian space robots. Now, inspired by classic survival horror franchises like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, both of which I've covered in the channel, Signalis actually uses the strengths of these games to its full advantage. Its pixelated low-poly art style complements a story that, while sometimes confusing, is profoundly human at its core. So, while we are here, I thought it would be a great time to explore the narrative that's been woven throughout the experience that is Signalis. We'll delve into parts of the story, explain the gameplay, and uncover hidden details that make this game so perplexing yet beautiful. I should point out, my goal for this video isn't to explain the entire lore behind Signalis. That shit would take a lifetime. Instead, I just want to talk about why I love this game and how the gameplay, story, and the hidden meanings all work together to just create a fantastic experience. Awakening from a stasis pod, we find ourselves in a large empty room. Exiting the adjacent room, we explore what seems to be a space vessel. Now, this introduction gives me a similar vibe to that of Dead Space, where you find yourself stranded, well, in space. Upstairs, we find a manual confirming our suspicion. We are aboard the Penrose, a ship sent by the nation to survey and search for habitable planets, manned by a Gestalt and replica, a concept we'll soon understand better. In the personnel room, we discover a blood-covered diary entry. Its contents are kinda hard to discern for now. The last room on this floor is the cryogenics one, with a pod in the middle, possibly holding someone inside. However, it does require a code to open. Heading south, we find a mess hall that's fully intact, making us question why we are all alone and where everyone else is. Reading the instruction manual, we learn that we are a Replika, the German word for replica, meaning an imitation or copy. Now, the concept of replicas isn't unique to Signalis, but has actually been used in other media, like Blade Runner, where replicas are bioengineered persons. A nearby monitor also reveals that the ship has taken critical damage, as well as listing the crew members. We are LSTR 5112, or Elster for short. We are located currently in the mess hall, but the Gestalt officer, A. Young, is listed as having no signal. Atop the monitor desk, we also find some adhesive tape. Moving to the cockpit, most controls seem to indicate the ship has irreparable damage, but we find a strange photo. Inspecting it, we get to see Ariane Young, the Gestalt officer aboard the ship with us, with a pattern on the back saying cryo, likely the code for the cryopods. Using this code, the game slowly builds up anticipation for what's inside, and as we open the pod, we retrieve a bloody airlock key. Now, I love this. The slow drainage of the water from the cryopod as it builds up, this fear of what could be inside, only to reveal that it holds a broken keycard, which has been snapped in half. Now, lucky for us, we can combine it using the adhesive tape and use it in the airlock room. Suiting up, we step outside onto a snowy planet. climbing a set of stairs towards a large gate that looks oddly shaped like a Minecraft ender portal, eventually finding a giant gaping hole. Signalis actually uses these holes whenever we're about to dive deeper into a darker place of the mind. I love this as it reminds me of Silent Hill. Specifically in Silent Hill 2, the holes you get to choose to jump down are representations of James Sunderland going deeper into his own subconscious. And Signalis mirrors that in a great way here. At the bottom, we crawl through a hole and enter a room filled with references for later in the game, so we're gonna ignore most of it. We see a non-functional radio transmitter connected to a computer, as well as a flag resembling the German flag with the colors red, yellow, and black. Or if you're way more based, it's the Belgian flag. Let's go, baby! Alright, well, the game's German text and flags obviously reflect the developers, as the people who worked on it are German. Next to the flag are pictures of a coastline, though it's unclear if they're photographs or drawings, and on a bookshelf, we find old imperial cereals, which are banned, indicating there's probably a conflict between the nation we belong to and some empire. There's also books about radio operations, and in the corner is a heavy safe box with 3 locks. I really wonder if it's going to be important for later.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
The last item is an old tome, The King in Yellow, an actual book written by Robert W. Chambers. Picking it up, the computer turns on, flashing the word Achtung, along with images of our character Elster, Ariane Young, and the beach from the pictures. This eerie introduction to Signalis really does a good job at echoing the themes from other games like Dead Space, with its isolated space horror, which is exactly what we get here, and even Silent Hill with its psychological horror. The game's symbolism and mysterious narrative also takes inspiration from games like BioShock or Nier Automata, where deeper meaning and connections become way more clear as the story progresses. So, let's dive deeper. This chapter is called Synchronizität, the German word for synchronicity, referring to the simultaneous occurrence of events that appear to be related but have no discernible or casual connection. We now find ourselves in Sierpiński Station 23 on the planet Leng, standing inside of the bathroom. Now, facing the mirror, our character states, "I came all the way here to find her. There's no turning back now." Now, this scene is clearly inspired by Silent Hill 2. Much like how James Sunderland stares into the mirror, we can see that Signalis proudly displays its influences, with Silent Hill clearly being one of the biggest ones. Exiting the bathroom, we explore the surface access room and discover a reception's keycard, and also a welcome pamphlet for S23 Sierpiński Station. Now, the pamphlet mentions Leng, the planet we're on, and explains that S23 Sierpiński is a mining facility that's contributing to the war effort against the Empire. We also learn about ration marks, which are a currency used by the nation to reward people, basically your dollar bills. Using the receptionist keycard, we enter a corridor and spot a poster called The Rule of 6. Now, this refers to the game's inventory system, which limits you to 6 inventory slots, meaning more backtracking for me, which is a bloody headache. But you'll also notice something interesting here. There is a camera. Actually, there are several cameras in the whole game, and they follow our every move. In the next hallway, we encounter a dead Yuli unit. Now, this possibly is another replica like ourselves, just a different sort of form of it. It seems that it's got its biocomponents infected. Further on, we find a dictionary that explains what replicas are, which is synthetic reproductions of gestalts. So, now we kind of understand that these things are more or less copies of us. Interesting thing is that the word gestalt itself actually means an organized whole perceived as more than the sum of its parts, implying that humans are complete while replicas are just parts of a gestalt. Here we also discover the game's first save point in the staff room. If we read the notes written by someone named Adler mentioning the protector wall safes and exposed codes, we can figure out what we kind of need to do. So, going towards classroom 4B, which holds the safe that we're looking for, we see another poster warning us to not run in the hallways.
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am. I'm fast as fuck, boy.
We do also notice another thing here, which is a photo or two pictures on the wall. They are of the Empress and her daughter. Two characters we know very little about for now, but they will be important for later, so remember them. Now, since we don't have the code, we have to continue searching. Moving towards the north, we meet another replica. This one is named Star. Showing her a photo of the person we're looking for, she doesn't recognize them and informs us that all Gestalt workers were sent into the mines. What's interesting though is that we don't even recognize the person on the photo either. We don't even know who this is just yet. Now, since all the Gestalts have gone down to the mine shaft, we're gonna need the administrator key to get there. Lucky us, we instead find the protector key. Now, this allows us to actually enter the observation room back at the start of the facility. Now, once we enter this room, there's a window, and it seems to be a two-way mirror of sorts that can peer into the classroom. We also find our first weapon, a Type 75 pistol, which actually comes with the most common ammo in the whole game, along with an aperture card that can be picked up. But another thing that we notice in this room is a memorandum by Aeon. This is the nation's media regulation service, stating that it is no longer permissible to use a specific term, reinforcing that feeling that we are stuck under the foot of an oppressive regime. I mean, really think about it, guys. The one-way mirror in this room, the non-stop cameras following our every step, and the redacted word in the letter all paint a grim picture of this place. It's kind of reminiscent of Orwell's 1984, which more or less describes a dystopian future police state where every step you take is being watched. Returning to the hallway, we now see that Yuli unit from earlier, and this bitch is reanimated and is now attacking us. Here is the game's combat, and I want to talk about this for a bit. See, the game uses a focus system, where the longer you actually scope in and aim at something, the smaller your crosshair becomes, but the higher the damage. The game forces you into this interesting way of doing gameplay, where you kind of have to pick and choose when and how you're going to shoot. Do you want to sneak up on an enemy, slowly scope in and then fire off? Or do you have to blast your way through but do less damage, which means you're going to have less ammo? I think it's a great mechanic that definitely exists in other games, but I find it to be unique in its execution here. The game kind of requires you to stay nimble and move to not get killed all the time. You may also notice that the actual style of the game is for a bird's eye view, but switches to a first-person camera during certain segments where story is more important. I've actually installed a third-person camera mod. Yes, it's a mod, but it basically allows me to give you guys a different view of this game, similar to what you would see in like Resident Evil 4. The monster keeps squirming, so of course, like the gentleman we are, we stomp the shit out of it. Heading up to the library, we encounter a Gestalt named Ito Isa, who has killed a monster on her own. Now it seems that Isa is looking for someone, just like we're looking for that girl on the photo. But checking one of the notes that was left by Isa, she mentions a person called Erica, probably her sister. Now, using that aperture card we got from the observer's office, we discovered the code for the classroom safe is 204512, which, interestingly, 512 is also our LSTR number. There's actually also a funny little reference that's hidden in this code, and it's from the game System Shock, a classic from the 90s. See, the code of the very first safe in every System Shock game is always 0451, and this exact sequence of numbers is also contained in the code of the first safe that we see here in Signalis, being 204512. Now, inside the actual locker, we find the classroom key. When we return to the aula where the Star unit was, she's actually gone, but she left a repair patch and some ammunition for us. Now, using the classroom key, we can enter inside. The whole room is empty except for a giant gaping hole. Dropping down it, we see flashes of corrupted replicas. One is chomping away at a corpse like it's about to make some spicy soup. Most paths are blocked, but if we go through some of the hallways, we'll eventually find the elevator lobby. Here we can try to call for an elevator, however, to actually use it, we need a protector ID, which we don't have yet. It also tells us that the top floor has been redacted. This possibly could be the same redacted text we saw earlier in the files back at the observer's room. One thing we do find here is the server's hatch key though, which we pick up. Using it on the service hatch, we can open it and do a quick lock-picking sort of puzzle. This one just requires you to match up the arrows and the dials until we get it right. It's randomized, so it's mostly just trial and error. Exploring the northern corridor, we find some rooms. Like, for example, in evidence storage, we can find a locked butterfly box. And in the adjacent room, we can actually have another save location containing the first of many storage boxes where we can, of course, leave items. This is something that's often done in games. But there's also another little interesting reference here. The creepy red save system. It looks just like in Silent Hill 2. I'm not even gonna lie, but just the sound of saving our game each time straight up gave me chills. The last room in the corridor is the office, and there are loads of things to find here. One of those is the disposable stun prod, a close-range stun gun with only one charge per use. It is honestly the perfect weapon for a quick and desperate defense if you're in a tough situation. We also find another safe as well as a poster of a FALKE unit. Seemingly, these are highly esteemed replica within the nation, with the name FALKE also being the German word for falcon. So, as you might start noticing here, a lot of the characters do actually use names of birds. Like, for example, Elster is also a bird. In specifically German, it means magpie. Additionally, there's an East Wing key here. With it in hand, we enter the East Wing, which contains the Protector bathroom. Two of the doors here are locked, similar to that strange locked bathroom we've seen before. Makes me wonder if anyone's taken a massive shit behind the door. In the kitchen, we find that Yuli unit that was chopping away at a big old corpse. Now, we can fight her or simply sneak by. On the wall, we can also notice a giant flesh growth. I really hope she's not using that for the soup. Heading to the pantry, another Yuli unit is here, but once again, we can avoid it and simply just check the nearby poster. Now, this one lists the Yuli units as simply Universal Light Replica, meaning that they're most likely a mass-produced and considered less important sort of unit for the nation. Which brings me to another point about this game. It does do a lot of this sort of storytelling where it just leaves notes and posters that you don't really need to read, but they give you further context on the game's world. Picking up the Mensa key here, and with it in hand, we can enter the next room. Here, two more corrupted replicas are seen, but we can try to sneak by them, or next, we meet Storage. She's a protector unit acting as a pseudo-guard watching over everyone on this floor. Forcing interactions from her, she eventually reveals that the commander, FALKE, of this facility, which I mentioned earlier, is one of the highest level replicas, has gotten sick, and so have many others. She also tells us that the administrator most likely knows more, but who knows where he can be found. On the desk, we can actually pick up the West Wing key, but it also has the name Seo Alina listed on it. Reading one of the notes written by Storage, it's clear that things are really bad at this facility. They are just trying to hold out until reinforcements arrive from Heimat, which is another planet. She also adds a postscript mentioning that the administrator is acting strangely due to an incident, and the absence of the commander has made things even worse for him. Outside, we run into another enemy type. These are the corrupted star units. They have much longer legs, making them taller than the Yulis. They're also armed with batons, which give them further reach, which allows them to hit us much easier. In the worker bathroom, we find a broken key. Now, to fix it, we'll need to use the West Wing key to make our way towards the showers. Here, we can actually observe a corrupted Yuli checking itself out in the mirror. Something that's actually explained a bit later. For now, we sneak past it and pick up the second piece of the broken key. In the following registry room, we find a search protocol, which outlines the arrests and suspicions surrounding certain gestalts in the facility. Helene Song, arrested for promoting counter-revolutionary ideas at university. Julia Huang, arrested for suspicion of bioresonance. This term will be very important throughout the remainder of Signalis, so keep it in mind. And again, we see the name Seo Alina, which you guys may remember was on the key we got earlier. However, her listing only says that she collapsed during work. And then the last person on the list is Heinrich Fukuyama, who also was arrested on suspicions of conspiracy against the state. Besides Seo Alina, each of these people have some sort of history of going against the nation seemingly, which is likely why they were all sent to Sierpinski, a cold, desolate planet where all they can do is mining duties, just like how people in the former Soviet Union would be sent to gulags in Siberia. I mean, even the names of these facilities are pretty similar. Sierpinski sounds oddly similar to Siberia, both of which are essentially a work camp. Again, the game gives off this feeling of a totalitarian ruling party that allows zero room for freedom in his population. Next to the registry, we find the interrogation room. It's bloody, but it holds a note called frequencies alongside different words like moon, sword, and tree. In the adjacent room is a place called isolation. There are 4 cages in it, 3 of which contain motionless bodies, all possibly belonging to 3 of the 5 people from the, well, arrest notes. And guarding them is a corrupted star unit that just keeps going in circles. Now, if we take our 2 broken pieces of the keys, they will form the butterfly key. You guys may remember we were in a room earlier where there was a butterfly box. Using it there, it opens up, revealing a hexagon-shaped object named the Plate of Eternity. Subscribe to Blue Land so we're getting 10,000 subs. We once again find ourselves outside, back in a first-person view. This place looks desolate, like a weather station atop of a gloomy mountain. Checking the first door, it contains the numbers 160.00 on it. With nothing outside, we can actually enter the building. The first thing we pick up here is the radio module, a device that allows us to tune in and listen to special frequencies. This has got to be one of the most interesting devices and also most important devices in the entire game, as it will reveal many secrets as we progress further. It serves like a gameplay device that helps us understand puzzles and parts of the story. Checking the rest of the rooms, there are several notes, each holding some significance. The first one is addressed to a radio officer, Iris Young. Now, we can discern that this seems to be Ariane Young's mother. The person who's writing it is Ariane's aunt, Camilla. The letter suggests that the aunt reported them to government officials, forcing Ariane to be separated from her mom to instead live in the city with her aunt. Which means that this weather station we're currently inside of is one where Ariane spends some parts of her life, putting into question, why are we seeing all of this right now? Now, if we go back to that door with 160 on it, we can now tune our radio to that exact frequency, and doing this, it will open the door. With the radio module on us now, we can go to the wall safe in the office. You might recall we found a letter named Frequencies. Well, if we check that paper as well as the drawing on the wall, you will notice that it matches the tree drawing. And so if we check our paper, it says to set the frequency to 178 if it's the tree. Doing this gives us a randomized code, which when entered, gives us access to the locker. Inside, we find the protector ID for the elevator. Trying to head to the 6th floor, the elevator abruptly stops, and we only make it to the 3rd floor. And the worst thing is, our protector ID gets impounded. So we instead find ourselves in the medical ward. Now, heading towards the reception, we can catch our breath and pick up a new weapon, the pump-action shotgun. The back room features an old computer that needs a blank card to be used, so we'll have to return here later. In the waiting room, we find a note named Sword. The only other time we've seen that exact word was in the frequencies note that we used earlier to unlock the safe. Inside the protector bathroom, we find the pump room key. And in the storeroom, we can also pick up a wrench, both of which will be necessary for later. Starting things off, the pump room key opens the room itself, and here we can find a note on the table that describes how to solve the water pump puzzle. Speaking of this puzzle, it is actually weird because it is sort of similar to the water equalization puzzle from Resident Evil 2 Remake and as well as Code Veronica, where you have to do the exact same thing by simply pressing the buttons in the right order to equalize out the water. Now, we can actually jump down from the protector bathroom, but before doing that, we first explore some of the northern corridors. For example, in the morgue, we encounter a new enemy type, the corrupted Aura units. These guys have giant, inflated hands and arms that are hunched over. Their bodies are honestly so corrupted and degraded that you can see the tissues all around them from their bodies sticking out. Now, the most surprising part is that they will actually appear from the ground, making them harder to prepare for compared to the other corrupted enemies. Now that we're back at the bathroom, we can actually drop down, and immediately we find the water key before quickly making our way into a flooded office. Here, we find another key, which you may notice the game has a lot of these, but this one is for the examination, which we will need for upstairs. Lucky us, we also discovered the blank card that's necessary for the old computer in the save room. But before we leave, we first check the sleeping ward. Everything here seems quiet. Almost too quiet. The game has lulled us into a false sense of security. Now, as I first walk in, it all looks empty and safe. There's even ammo all in the middle. But after crossing that halfway point, of the room, the RR units will appear and attack me. And I love it when games do this kind of thing because it makes sure that you are always staying on your toes. Nearby is the vent room, but to open the vent inside of it, we need a socket to match with our wrench first. While we were here, we also picked up a video cassette, so hurrying back upstairs to the examination room with the key in hand, we inside are able to find the missing socket, as well as an auto injector. Now, auto injectors are items that will quickly heal you if you need them. Quickly swinging by the x-ray room, here we can figure out a puzzle for that blank computer card. See, if we use the x-ray machine and filter through different objects, we'll find one with a punch card featuring a specific pattern. Now, if we bring this exact same pattern, as well as our punch card over to the computer, we can actually do the same pattern on it, and now we can use it. Downstairs in the vent room, we can also combine our wrench and socket to open it up and get our hands on the air key. By now, you may notice that the keys we're collecting are all related to elements. We got a water key and an air key. Bringing all of these keys over to the S-lock in the waiting room and inserting them, we can notice that we have 2, but we still need a few more. So we head to the south corridor. The first room we enter is ICU 01, or Intensive Care Unit 01, where we can uncover a diary entry from Alina Seo, the person in the photo and the same individual we told the star unit we are searching for. Alina seemingly is writing about us, Elster, and mentions being knocked out from a fall and a strange mood around Sierpinski. Nearby, we also uncover a video player. Now we can put our video cassette inside and watch it. This sends us into another first-person segment. We find ourselves on a subway train. In front of us, a white-haired girl. As we try to approach her, she vanishes. Ariane Young, our Gestalt officer from the Penrose, leaving behind the gold key. We are back in the ICU. Now we can explore a bit further and eventually figure out from some letters that there is a weird and strange infection spreading all around the station, which kills Gestalts really fast, but not as fast for replicas, instead just corrupting them and making them go crazy. The last room we check holds a traumatized Yuli unit, and speaking to her yields little progress. This room also contains a wall safe with a sword symbol. Now, if we match up the letters on a paper labeled sword with the numbers from the sword frequency, we get the code to actually open up the safe. Inside, we find the incinerator room key, as well as the eidetic module. Now, this is an eye that actually allows you to take photos of puzzles in the game and just useful as a way for you to take photos if you need to remember certain notes. Heading to the incinerator room, we find flares. Now, these are actually used to fully dispose of replica bodies, preventing them from actually reactivating. This is because they are different from humans. They can come back to life. Checking the incinerator itself, it's on, but it holds our final key inside of it. To turn it off though, we need to match the CO2, the O2, and the gas levels in the chamber through some trial and error, to be frankly honest with you guys. Finally, obtaining the fire key, which is aptly named as such given where we found it. With all the keys inserted into the lock, we can now open it to reveal the surgery room. Here, we can stock up on ammo and save our game. A moment of peace before everything goes to shit. Jumping down, we are now facing our first boss battle against MNHR, or Mynah, a third-generation replica. Now, the name Mynah actually refers to a family of songbirds found in South Asia. Design-wise, these replicas are bulky, equipped with giant suits and high-powered mining lasers, making them far larger than any other replica we've encountered so far. Even its design sort of reminds me of the big daddies from like BioShock, both wielding powerful big-ass weapons. Now, the battle itself against Mynah is relatively straightforward if you know what to do. First, we just gotta dodge and weave and basically just find different objects to avoid the laser bullets. And simply wait for Mynah to be consumed by oxidant and infections. Now, during these brief moments, she'll start to puke up blood. The way this is shown is oddly similar to this scene from Silent Hill 3. The scene features Heather Mason getting consumed by a fleshy growth all around the hospital room. Now, if you stay in the room, eventually she dies. And just like that, here we're witnessing Mynah in a hospital surgery room going through the same pain, which is just oddly similar. During these moments, we can freely shoot Mynah right in the face. However, that's not enough though, because she's gonna cause a few aura units to also appear from the ground, adding to the challenge. To take them down, we can just shoot them, but they will not be fully killed. Instead, we need to use flares that we picked up in the incinerator room to fully defeat them. Eventually, Mynah succumbs to the damage and will die. We now encounter Adler, or ADLR. He is the administrator whose key we need for the mineshaft. When we show him images of Alina Seo, whom we're searching for, Adler pushes us. Warning us that we shouldn't have returned. Hey yo, this guy's a shithead already, bro. What the fuck? We then awaken, now playing as Isa from the first level. She's in school and has fallen asleep while waiting for Erica. The setting is Rotfront, Sector C, Mandelbrot Polytechnical High School. Exploring the area, it's mostly empty, adding to the sort of eerie atmosphere of this whole place. Like, being in a school after hours is just weird. Heading towards the library, we peer inside and see what looks to be Ariane Young. The girls surrounding her, wearing masks that are really strange, and it's clear she's being bullied. Perhaps they're wearing masks to hide their ugly mugs. This would mean that Ariane Young and Isa most likely knew each other or at least interacted at some point. Back in Sierpinski, we find ourselves alive still, cushioned by what seems to be multiple replica bodies. They're all reminiscent of Elster herself. Starting to get a bit of a sus of all this shit, not gonna lie. With that sorted, we check one of the rooms containing a Paternoster lift system. Now, if you're not familiar with this, I'm gonna nerd out for a bit. It's a form of elevator that works in a kind of perpetual, slow-moving loop up and down. It was invented by Peter Ellis in Liverpool. However, one of the most famous examples of this sort of elevator exists in Prague, the Czech Republic, where in one of the council offices you can actually find one of these going up and down, which is really cool. To fix it, we need a fuse. Luckily, we found a maintenance key in the adjacent room, and using it, we can exit towards a balcony. Going down to the 6th floor, we witness a horrifying sight. Bodies stacked on top of bodies in the elevator. Now that we can look at them even closer, they all resemble Elster, or at least an LSTR unit, raising some really weird questions. This is our first hint that this may not be our first time here, and also maybe another hint towards this being part of some sort of endless loop. Nearby, we find a postbox labeled 512, the same number as the Penrose, as well as Elster's 512 designation, suggesting that this specific postbox could belong to us. The next room features some interesting posters. One having an enforcer unit called Storch. Another one is a strange poster that simply says Bujan wird brennen, or Bujan will burn, in German, possibly again being the enemy of the nation, the giant empire. Now the funniest shit here is actually on the table. We find an angry note bitching about the Yuli units next door playing their music. This is some next level pettiness, but here we actually now run into a corrupted Storch unit. These are enforcers with big riot shields. The best way to actually defeat them is to let them close in and then let them expose their bodies while charging up an attack. Then we can fire off. We also now uncover our first notes on the replicas, detailing their functions. For example, star replicas, for instance, are tall with long legs, making them ideal for riot control, which is why they're designed that way. With the next room being too dark and a note explaining that the lights have been fucked with, we'll need a flashlight module to enter certain rooms. In the workshop hallway, we see a giant red blood trail. Like any sane person, we're following that bitch straight to the source. What do you think I am, a pussy? Nah. We find Isa, who has reached the commander's room, but Adler, the same dickhead who pushed us down the elevator, is also here. He tells her not to be afraid, but while this is happening, text flashes on the screen saying, "None of us are here by choice." What that means right now is hard to tell, but it will make sense eventually. Downstairs, we encounter a corrupted unit. A poster on the wall shows Heimat, the cradle of the revolution. These posters are starting to feel more and more akin to propaganda posters from like the Cold War. In the kitchen, we find the fuse that we need, as well as another poster of another planet. This one is Kites, a planet that the Empire has taken that needs liberation. Moving into the management office, we run into arguably one of the most terrifying enemies. These are KLBR, or Calibri units, which are also based on a bird. A note later in the game actually states that these fellas are able to use bioresonance, something that the game has yet to fully explain to us, but only something that has come up in passing while reading certain notes. Basically, it allows the Calibri to telepathically talk to each other, almost like a hive mind, by using radio signals, which is what bioresonance is supposed to be, some sort of weird power that allows them to use telepathy and control things with their mind. Hence why, when you battle the Calibri, you need to use the radio module to fight back. I find this to honestly be really a cool gameplay mechanic, because if you don't go to the frequencies in time, you will be killed. So you have to make sure you get the frequency in time and finally kill the Calibri. Checking the wall, there's a painting that Elster finds familiar, but she can't exactly put her finger on it. Another note also indicates that there's a keyhole on this wall. So, now that we have the fuse key, we go back up to the Paternoster elevator. Using the fuse, we have to solve a quick math puzzle to turn it on. With the Paternoster elevators now being active, we can actually use them to go to the lower floors. Heading down to the 8th floor, we find a poster for another planet. This time, it's Rotfront, another planet under the nation's control. Its name literally meaning Red Front in German. Next, we find the FALKE office. Inside, there's a note about Mynah, explaining that they aren't suited for combat, which might explain why the one we fought kept breaking down and not meant to really be in battles. The two other things we find in this room is notes on FALKE. FALKE is supposed to be the commander unit, the one controlling the whole facility, and also these guys are bioresonant, but it doesn't end there. On the wall, we also see the Isle of the Dead. This is a painting by Swiss artist Arnold Böcklen, whose paintings seem to be relevant throughout this game. They appear quite a few times already if you guys haven't noticed. The final room itself holds FALKE, lying in the bed as if she's stuck in a long dream. Reading her diary, she talks about her mind being infiltrated and slowly losing herself, mentioning a girl with white hair, again possibly Ariane, implying that she might have had bioresonant abilities too. How else would she enter FALKE's mind? In her arms, FALKE holds a owl-shaped box. We can't open it yet, so instead we just take the shutter handle and move towards Adler's room. This of course being the asshole that pushed us down the elevator. Lucky us though, his room holds the flashlight, which is necessary and almost impossible to continue in the game unless you have it for dark rooms. We also find some interesting details. Adler has a poster of FALKE, the super weapon of the nation, as well as several notes, implying that he might have a thing for her. Apparently, Adler units are made to be working alongside FALKE's as their right-hand man. Back on the 7th floor though, we use a shutter handle now to access the piano room. It holds a save point, as well as the owl keycard. This key will allow us into the staff room, where we can find a broken music cassette, as well as a portable music player with a knife stabbed into it. I'm gonna be honest, this is probably due to that same Storch replica that had complaints about the music that the Yuli were playing, which would imply that the letter we read probably led to this Storch unit almost killing the Yulis after them just playing some music. It is kind of wild. Now with the help of the flashlight, we can enter the shooting range. Here, we can find a score sheet showing that the star units are by far the best marksmen, which means they can probably spin the block easily. But the biggest thing we find is some adhesive. Now, combining the tape and the cassette together with the adhesive, we can fix it and head towards the protector's office. Here, we use the hunter key, which we found earlier, to open the weapon case we found, giving us a brand new gun, the revolver. It does a decent amount of damage, way more than our regular pistol, but it doesn't have as much ammo. Lucky us, we also uncovered the island key, which might fit into the keyhole in the island painting. Finally, we find another poster, this one depicting the planet Veneta, the home planet of the nation, seemingly where everything starts. A note also mentions a Calibri unit hiding in the management office on the 7th floor, and that apparently using a feedback loop of her frequency is possible to neutralize her. So, with some haste, we head over to the island painting, unlocking it with the key. Unlocking it, we find inside of it the workshop keycard. You guys may remember that the doors next to the workshop all have bloody trails, so we kind of have a bit of uncertainty as we go inside. The room is calm. The first note on the workshop desk contains classified information about Storch units, revealing they are all more volatile than others. To stabilize their personas, as they call them, they need fetish items to keep them happy, such as pairing them with star units and allowing them to take baths, showers, and also read books about mythology to keep their minds in order, explaining why the Storches reacted in such an angry manner, to be honest, against the Eulas just playing music. Inside the room, there's also a radio. Inserting our taped-up cassette, we observe the numbers listed on the radio being 142. Switching our frequencies to Dad, we hear the following. This is Swan Lake by Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. It's a song about a princess cursed by an evil wizard and her prince's journey to outwit the wizard and save her. The end of the story, though, is that they both choose to end their lives together to escape the wizard's curse. With the music playing, we head over to the owl-shaped box in FALKE's arms. Inside is the hummingbird key, which grants us access to the Calibri study room. Here, we can find the eagle keycard, which will let us snoop around Adler's belongings. First, we read some notes. One Calibri had suggested that Adler was suspicious all along and was wondering what he was up to. They even mentioned a LSTR unit that had never been at Sierpinski before, somehow showing up inside of his mind, which was odd, but also further notes discuss the abilities of the Calibri and how their bioresonance allows them to control replica as well as gestalts, essentially functioning as a hive mind that can control people. One interesting note is about the Yuli units, who are actually chefs in the nation, hence why whenever you do encounter them, they're always carrying kitchen knives. To stabilize their personas, they're also allowed to use mirrors to check themselves out, which would explain what we saw earlier in one of the bathrooms. You guys may remember we saw Yuli just checking itself out the whole time. They apparently also love music and work best in groups of 10, which is why they were playing the piano music that pissed off the Storch. The final note we read mentions the Aura units, who apparently dig tunnels when they are depressed, as that's the way that they end their lives, explaining why they always attack us from underground. Inside the next door, we encounter a Calibri. After tuning around with the frequencies, we take her down and pick up the key for Postbox 512. First is Adler's office. His diary provides some insight into his thoughts. He speaks of a girl with white hair, possibly another memory of Ariane. He also suggests that this memory could be from his former Gestalt life, indicating that replica units are based on real humans, or Gestalts, and seem to retain some aspects of those original human individuals. He also mentions a strange replica with an orange chest piece, one he had never encountered before. His room also contains notes about LSTR, or units like ourselves. Apparently the original neural pattern, or the thing that was used to create the LSTR unit, was apparently destroyed, so they have been using a decommissioned LSTR from the Penrose program to create new ones instead. For now, we can't open the box in Adler's room, so instead we head to the 6th floor to open the Postbox 512. Inside of it, we find the library key, and the library is odd. Here we find notes about Mynah, Adler, but more interestingly, there is a lone Calibri cowering in the corner. She seems distraught, wishing that she had been corrupted so she could be part of the group, feeling left out alone because the others are just singing their song. But hearing it makes her scared. It almost sounds painful to her. After talking to her, we check out the library computer puzzle. Here, we just need to adjust a dial until it fits perfectly. Suddenly, the Book of Yellow appears and opens in front of us once more, revealing the astrolabe in it, but also a hexagon shape inside of the book similar to the hexagon in the logo of Signalis. Taking it with us, we check the star room nearby. This room actually has a rotating map of all the planets in the solar system. So, using the ionic eye from earlier, we can take a picture so we remember their positions. Using the astrolabe on the shrine inside of Adler's room, we can match up the shapes from the box to that of the solar system image from the star room. Again, even this box has a hexagon shape on it. All of the stuff has hexagons on it. But however, when we do open it, inside there is two objects. One is Adler's admin key card, and the other is a shrine diary. Reading this diary, we can learn that Adler has been suffering from short-term memory loss, dating each entry with the same date and experiencing déjà vu, feeling like each day has already happened. He notices that some entries in his journal are ones he doesn't even remember or recall himself writing, feeling like something is calling to him from the minds underneath Sierpinski. But it seems like something is calling for us as well. With the admin key in hand, we enter the elevator. If she is alive, she's probably there. We witness Issa confronting Adler, panicking with a knife in hand. She is ready to fight. Adler mentions he's done this before, implying this scenario has played out multiple times. Or perhaps he's remembering incorrectly. Issa then stabs him and he falls into a giant hole with the screen flashing Zyklus, meaning cycle. This chapter is called Liminalität, or in English, Liminality. You might be familiar with this concept from media like Backrooms. Liminality referring to the quality of being in between two places, like transitioning from one space to another. Think of the moment right before you awaken from sleep, like right in the middle. Well, that is what liminality is. Now, in the excavation part of the mind, we find some lasers in a giant pile, the same ones used by the Mynahs. A notable feature in this section is that our map is now gone. See, the map has been our best friend, helping us navigate without much trouble, but now we must tread more carefully. Being mapless actually makes sense, as we are so far down in the mines now, which have yet to be mapped out. In a nearby room, we find a flare gun. This is an amazing weapon to keep on hand. It serves as sort of a weapon, but also as a light source if you need it. On the desk nearby, there's a note written by Alina Seo, indicating she's also searching for us while we are hunting for her. We can also encounter a Mynah named Beo. Now, her hydraulics have failed, and she's sort of accepted her fate, knowing that she will be replaced in the end. She seems depressed, but is thankful for us taking the time to talk to her. And there are moments like this, if you guys haven't already noticed it, throughout the whole game, and talking to these characters will actually impact your game's ending. Leaving her, we head to the slooping elevator, which takes us down even deeper. First, we reach the transport shaft nexus, crawling with corrupted units, so we defeat them all. After clearing the area, we enter the last stand room, where we can find an LSTR unit, or at least it looks like that, on the floor, possibly dead. Nearby, we see a crying Yuli, as well as an injured Star unit. The Star actually consoles the Yuli, telling her that it will all be over soon. Their conversation feels intimate, almost like that of lovers. Leaving this place, we head to the material transport shaft and fight off another wave of enemies, including a Mynah, who before was a boss, but now are just regular enemies. Using our newly acquired flare gun, we can simply shoot a single flare into Mynah's face to take her down. Sliding down the transport shaft, we find ourselves at the same hole where Adler fell through earlier when he was stabbed by Issa. So, you guys know what time it is. It's time to go down the rabbit hole. As I've already mentioned, again, holes in this game are very reminiscent of Silent Hill. The same way that Silent Hill uses them to symbolize diving deeper into someone's mind, we're going to be going way further down once again. And just like in Silent Hill, we have a yes and no option as we're about to do this. After seeing a flash of Alina Seo, we find ourselves on a beach. The game has now shifted to a 4:3 aspect ratio, and the ground is littered with notes. Along the shore, the cloud waves break, the twin suns sink, the shadows lengthen. This passage is from a real-life book, The King in Yellow, which, again, holds significant importance to the game's story. As you guys may have noticed, we've actually found this book several times, and once again, under some rocks, we can see it. Trying to reach it, it's too far away, and instead, as we try to leave, the screen flashes red. We then find ourselves in a strange new place, filled with rotting flesh and the blood of the replicas. This part of the game is called Nowhere, and it's because, well, as you guys may have noticed, this place doesn't actually exist. Quite literally. There is no map, and unlike the mines, feels more like purgatory than an actual place of existence. Checking nearby, we find the nursery. Here we can pick up a wooden doll, and it requires 3 pieces for it to be fully completed, so we're going to be having to hunt for those throughout this place. Checking the nearby door, it has a warning, telling us nothing good will be found inside. However, the door also tells us that it will be opened once something is killed. We just don't know what that thing is yet. So, instead of wasting time, we climb down the hole and find ourselves 2 thick old Eulers to deal with. Of course, we killed them though. Luckily for us, there is a safe room nearby, with a note simply stating leave. But of course, like the chads we are, we don't plan on leaving this place anytime soon. We do find ourselves a giant meat hole. This thing does give off some sort of suggestive vibes, if you catch my drift. Yeah, boy. But more than anything, it just looks disgusting. Almost like this whole location is a living, breathing creature of sorts. Or perhaps this is some sort of cancerous growth that has been infecting everyone above. Before jumping down the hole, we go to a room nearby. Here we can actually find a note again, but this time it's one written by Alekia Doe, The Sound of Stars. It's actually a story that centers around art that is meant to inspire hope and love, which this game kind of does once we get a bit into the endings. Behind us is a wall of what looks to be TVs with giant red eyes following us. And on the desk is a device locked away with a microphone that most likely needs us to play a sound for it to unlock. For now, we instead head back to the giant meat hole. And of course, we're gonna jump down that bad boy. At the bottom, we run into Issa, and she is engrossed in a battle of life and death against the, well, giant monster. And this is the second boss battle in the game, the Chimera. Now, for any of you that have watched, well, other stuff, you will know what a Chimera is. It's basically an amalgamation of a bunch of different creatures into one. In this case, it's a weird fusion or combination of multiple of the replicas into one incoherent unit. The Chimera's body has legs of a storch while the arms are parts of the Ara units. Together, their flesh has been melded together inside of the cage. As to why Issa is here fighting this creature, we don't know, but for the battle though, we can simply shoot off a few bullets or use a single flare shot which should do a decent amount of damage, allowing for Issa to get up and fire off a shot from her gun. She does get a lot of kickback and knocks herself out. Now that we've helped her out, we can leave her in the safe zone for now. While Issa rests on the bed, we can do some exploring. Nearby, we find three different things. One is the reagent's ring, aka the Ring of the King, or whoever is ruling. We also find a rusted key, which can be used upstairs. Finally, there is a plate, the heavy plate of flesh. This one is just like the one we found much earlier back in Chapter 1, if you guys remember. Next, we make our way back upstairs to the nursery. The door, which had the warning on it, is no longer locked, and inside, we see the shape of a body. Kind of reminiscent of the, well, disturbing shapes left behind when nuclear bombs were used in World War II. Nearby is a bottle of some sort of liquid, and right next to one of the chairs is a book. It lists Dreamer, a prison from which only escape is death. Deep below, the dreamer floats in a sea of flesh, the red eye birthing a new world from the dream of eternity. And each time the dreamer turns over in their sleep, the world turns over too until only flesh remains. This is an interesting passage, and this actually is, well, kind of relevant for the story, but we'll get to it. We can now use our rusted key to enter the sacrifice antechamber. Here, we can find another piece of a wooden doll, as well as a grenade round. Now, these rounds are actually perfect, and they're brand new, and can be basically used inside of our flare gun for way more damage. They will actually do an AoE, like area of effect damage, which is way more useful. The door here requires a code to be unlocked, so for now, we focus on returning back to Issa instead. We can hand her the small bottle, and if we do this, she will awaken. She also offers us the weapon that she was using earlier, and talking to her yields really no further results. And if we leave the room and return, she will be gone. Alright, now we can backtrack to the radio room. This time, however, we can use our radio to check the frequencies. Doing this will actually yield some great results, as on the monitor we can see the shapes and codes for several doors. And, well, we've yet to access these so far, so it's about time. The first place we're going to check out is the same room where we left Issa. We can now unlock the giant pentagon-shaped door using our scribbled down notes and enter inside. Here we only really find a few enemies, but also a giant freaking cleaver-like thing above us, as well as another plate in the middle. So we'll need to do some Indiana Jones type of shit to actually grab it. For now, instead we go upstairs and do the triangle door. Inside we have a mountain of enemies that confront us, one of which is another Mynah. But with the help of our, well, new rifle as well as grenade shells, they stand little to no chance against us. On the table, we also find the final wooden doll piece. Now, the west door here has a room with even more enemies as well as the serpent ring. Now that we have all the dolls collected, and if we combine them, you will notice that it kind of looks like one of those Russian dolls, but that's not all. Now with all the dolls collected, we can combine them and head down to replace the plate on the giant Indiana Jones trap. So all we gotta do is put our newly put together doll, and in return we get the plate of balance. You may notice that we've gotten a few plates so far, but they're not the final ones, we still need a few more. Our next task is the square-shaped room. Inside is a giant sprawling maze filled with barbed wire. Now, if we try to go through it, we actually take a lot of damage, but we have to be fast and our ammo is low, so we rush to get the plate of love. One of the last doors we have left to check is the star door, and the other side holds a bridge overlooking a gruesome river of flesh. More and more, this place is starting to feel like that of the other world from Silent Hill. The rusted cages and metal, the blood-soaked walls, and everything just gives me a similar vibe. Once again, Signalis loves to take influence from Silent Hill, and it's a great franchise to take influence from because, well, we haven't really had a good Silent Hill game in a long time, so taking influence from that is actually fantastic, and the results in this game are impeccable. The last room down the bridge has a note with a short riddle. It's about an empress, possibly the empress of the empire, of which the nation has such a big hatred, or perhaps it's something else. Either way though, if we brought along the rings that we've been collecting, we can now put them onto the statue of what looks to be the empress herself. The riddle gives us a general idea of which ring goes where. The wedding ring goes on the ring finger, obviously, which makes the most sense. The serpent ring, eating its own tail, goes on the little finger, possibly pointing to repetition. And finally, the reagents ring, being that of a ruler, goes on the pointing finger, the one that gives the orders. Opening up, inside we find another plate, the plate of knowledge. With that sorted, we only need one more plate to progress. This one will be found in the Calibri corridor. From here, we can reach the office where we find one incense and also a diary entry by Alina Seo. Reading the note, it says the following. How long has it been that I'm down here? How did I get here? Where is this place, and why am I here? My memory feels so blurry, as if I'd always been here, forever. Even my hair is slowly turning white. I remember my name, and I remember my life, but I also remember a different name and a different life. It feels like the line between her and me is blurring the longer I stay here. Things are starting to feel way more clear now. Alina Seo, the person we're searching for, could be the same person as Ariane Young from the Penrose, or at least they might be confusing each other. This is mainly based on the fact that Alina saying her hair is slowly turning white, the same color of Ariane's hair. In due time, this will all make sense. For now, we bring the incense back to one of the first puzzles in this area. This gives us the final plate, the plate of love. With all the plates on us, we head to the final gateway. Here, we can insert each plate and enter through the door. The other side holds a set of stairs. Once we climb them, we run into none else than Adler. His face looks nice and mushied up by the giant freaking knife just lodged into his eye. You may notice that the gate he's standing in front of is actually really similar to the gate that we first entered when we started the game, while going down the snowy path. Talking to Adler, he seems distraught, and the screen flashes the words, Ich warte. I'm waiting. As the sequence plays, the words come closer, and they keep flashing. We also see Alina Seo, Ariane Young, as well as Issa once more. We even see pictures flashing of the Isle of Dead, the painting we witnessed many times, as well as a quick image of Adler hunching in front of FALKE. We also get a set of flashing images that appear on screen. All of these images hold a significant relevance to the characters of Alina, Issa, and Ariane, as well as Elster herself. Eventually, we watch as Elster climbs the crashed Penrose. Touching the ship, it says, "Remember our promise." Elster tries to open the airlock, pulling it so hard that she rips her arms off. Falling down, she lays in the sand, and slowly, the life fades from her eyes. And yeah, that's the ending! Or is it? That was not the end of the game. And back in the menu screen, the first thing you may notice is the fact that Elster's eye, which normally, if you guys actually play the game, you will notice it follows our mouse cursor. but now it's lacking any kind of life when compared. Dead, similarly to how she just seemingly died on the Penrose. However, one of the more interesting things is that whatever we press next, whether it's the begin button or the exit the game button, it doesn't matter because it's going to launch us into a new save file. We find ourselves back at the Penrose, starting off just like we did at the beginning of the game. However, this time things are a bit different. So certain rooms which we couldn't access before are now accessible, and certain areas are locked away. I also find a goofy little picture of a colibri with the head of a cauliflower of sorts, which I found to be adorable. Upstairs, we find notes about not eating replicas, which is weird that they even have to point it out, but alright. Our job for now is to inspect each and every single part of the ship to make sure it's all intact. Back in the mess hall, this time around, if we check the monitor to see where everyone is, it actually shows Ariane as being active and alive, as opposed to the first time around. We find a sealed envelope here too. It's classified and the game gives us the option of either leaving it or opening it anyways. So like the chads we are, we of course open the letter because we don't give a shit. The notes inside are about Elster herself. It's about the fact that LSTR units are soldier units based on a Venetian neural pattern of a soldier. So according to the government, you should avoid socializing with them, as well as avoid showing them graphic movies of war which could resurface their Gestalt memories, or the memories of the person they originally were. In one of the rooms, we find a painting, very similar to all the paintings we've seen around the game all along. You may even recognize some of them already. After finishing our entire checklist, we can now enter the sleeping quarter. Inside, we see Ariane. She rushes and hugs Elster. Now, things should be pretty evident. Elster and Ariane are a couple. Something which you can figure out from all the notes is actually not meant to happen, as she is a replica and Ariane is a Gestalt. They're not supposed to mingle. But I guess being stuck together on a spaceship for so long makes you long for someone else no matter what. Now, while they're dancing, the screen shakes. The words Achtung or warning alongside a bunch of numbers flash onto the screen. We are back to where the fake ending left us. The game continues. We aren't done just yet. And this is because there seems to be a promise that was made between Ariane and Elster, which we need to keep and continue with. First thing we find is a note of possibly Ariane pleading for death, as she is fully in pain. The second note we find sounds about the same, pleading for the end and experiencing pure suffering. It seems like Ariane is sick and she doesn't want to keep on going. Entering the cryo chamber, this time there's a giant flesh growth on the pod, and right next to it is seemingly us, or at least another Elster wearing a uniform. So we yoink that fucking arm and take the armor too. You guys know how this shit works. Exiting the room, we now find a new red note in front of us, begging us to make it stop. Following the bloodstained path on the ground, we find another big old hole, and you know how this works. It is time to go down the rabbit hole. We are back at the beach. This time, it's a little bit different. The beach now makes more sense. It is actually the Isle of the Dead. That's the beach we find ourselves on. And on the ground, there are passages from different books, like The King in Yellow once more, that's been ever present throughout our entire experience. Walking around, we eventually find a red lantern boat. And as we step onto it, we enter the next chapter. We are once more back in Sierpinski, exactly where we started the first time around. The mirror and bathroom, however, are far more corrupted as flesh is consuming everything around us. Mostly all paths are now blocked by these giant flesh growths, and we do find the save room where we can pick up our previously deposited items. Entering the 4B classroom this time around, the room board says, "Du warst hier zuvor," or "You've been here before," which is true because if we use the exact same code, 204512 on the wall, the safe will actually open and give us the classroom 4C keycard. Blasting past a few enemies, we make it to that room. There is once again the giant hole, but jumping down this time, we once more see Adler. However, this time he ain't looking too good. His face has almost melted away, leaving a fleshy, disgusting mess. Welcome to Rotfront. This is the planet where Ariane lived for some time, but also a planet named the Red Front, which in itself is quite ominous given, the naming scheme. We find ourselves in the atrium. Behind us, we also see a giant solar map showing us all the planets of the nation, and nearby we can sneak into the Blockwart office. Here we can acquire our next weapon, the submachine gun. This is arguably the best weapon we can get in our hands on, as it does a ton of damage, and its speed is superior to any other weapon so far. Looking at the computer here, we can inspect the emails, and we also read some of them about the storefront, seemingly written by the aunt of Ariane Young. Apparently, Ariane is in the hospital and they can't get their hands on a certain key from her. Another email also speaks of a potential spy from the Empire hiding in this area, and that the things should be on high alert at the moment. The next email is one from Anya Ito. She writes about the bookstore key code being the birthdays of her daughters. And the final message is a request for relocation, with the aptly simple no as a response. Guess the Calibri working here really wanted to get the fuck out. Downloading all the emails, we can now get moving around this place. At the end of the hallway, we find another painting. It's the Isle of the Dead again. However, when we inspect it, we can discover a strange tarot card in the middle seemingly. Now, we'll be needing something to lodge it off from the painting, so instead we move upstairs and find the apartment complex. The first room we check has a special newspaper, Der Beschützer, or the Defender, or Guardian, which might be a joke on the real-life Guardian news outlet for whatever reason, but it's kind of goofy. It speaks of a celebration on Rotfront called Mondfest. We also pick up the hand wheel here, and then head to the apartment next door. However, this place seems to have a dark room for photo development, hence why we find development fluid for photos here. On the sofa, there's also another interesting piece of paper. It's a stolen document, seemingly implying this room could be belonging to a supposed spy that is on Rotfront, hence why he has a document about how replicas are made and how they're disposed of, which is kind of grim. Now, leaving the dark apartment, we find ourselves in the hospital hallway, leading to a room. Inside is a hospital bed, on top of which we also see a box. On it is a drawing of a magpie, the exact bird that Elster is based on. But it doesn't end there. I also have a note written about Ariane Young. The girl, without a doubt, is remarkably odd, certainly due to her being raised solely by her mother, rather than by a community of good people overseen by Blockwart, as is normal these days. Her obsession with paintings, music, and other such nonsense was clearly implanted during her time living in the mountains on the desolate radio outpost. And surely her friendship with those Venetian-born Itu sisters also exposed her to some of the questionable literature that is illegally sold in the parents' bookstore. She does not seem to understand that these distractions are no longer acceptable now, that she must partake in the society of our nation like anyone else. Personally, I can only hope military service will beat those frivolous ideas out of her, in a way that this school has failed to do so far. This gives us a far more clear image of who Ariane is. She grew up with her mother on the weather station, drawing and reading to pass the time. Hence why we find her paintings all over the game. But not just that, the radio station at the beginning of the game, the one where we found the radio module, well, that seems to definitely be connected to her too. And that would explain why our radio module has so many references to different frequencies. It seems she is now living Rotfront with her auntie, and she was bullied and hurt, leading to her going to the hospital. So for now, we leave the hospital room and instead bring the hand wheel we found down to the pipeworks hallway. Here we can now turn off the flames, allowing us to enter the garbage chute and pick up a old school blue diskette. Nearby in the disinfection room, which honestly really does not look disinfected to me, I mean it looks nasty, we do find some acetone as well. This could help us remove the heavy paint from the drawing we saw earlier to get the card. First, however, we go ahead and put the diskette inside the old computer. Using it, we unlock 3 different files on the PC. One is a readme.txt file, which tells us about the antennas and that they are limited in range and usage due to power shortages. Setting our radio to the listed frequencies of first 120, and then moving the antenna until we hear a different sound, and then moving the other one to 210, we eventually hear a jumbled mess of noises. It then lines up to 43. Typing this, which is the antenna where the sound starts from, into the transmitter program, it will allow us to choose Magpie. Doing this, we'll hear the following sound. Some of you may recognize this, but this is the exact sound you hear at the menu of Signalis. And if you don't know this sound, let me tell you a little bit about it, because it's actually super fascinating. This is the 3-note oddity, a strange, real-life radio code that was transmitted through a number of stations. See, this specific sound was sent out most likely by Hungarian intelligence in the real world. That's the same exact sound we have been hearing. Even in real life, it would start with 3 rising tones, and this would then be followed by and repeated for about 5 minutes before a pause would happen, and that would be then followed by the word Achtung twice, meaning attention or warning. Then it would read out a set of numbers before ending. The fact they actually used a real-life 3-note oddity in Signalis is kind of fantastic, given that the oddity was actually never explained, and at no point was it actually figured out or cracked, which is kind of similar to Signalis itself. This game is almost impossible to fully crack, which is what kind of makes it so interesting to dive through. And you guys will notice this by the end of this video, that the game has almost too much depth. But it doesn't end there. It also makes sense that someone like Ariane would hear something like this being transmitted over and have already understood it. We have already seen indications that Ariane's mother had access to banned books, and they both lived in a radio station which probably had a lot of outside interference coming its way. With this note playing, we can return to the hospital room, and inside, the box will now open if we play the sound from the radio to it. With that sorted, we now have the store key as well as one of the many tarot cards, that being the one called Star. Moving downstairs, we can also use the acetone we found earlier on the painting, loosening it and getting the second card, Lovers. All that remains left is a bloodied stain on the drawing. With every other path now being blocked, we head towards the meat grinder. All around it, goo of people can be seen, and jumping down the hole, the word tooth flashes on the screen while Ariane can be seen holding her face. Down here we find another card. This time it's the tower, but surrounding the card is a giant flesh piece, as well as teeth that seem to have been ripped out, which could be Ariane's. Nearby is a newspaper that speaks of a blockade by the Empire against the Yusan nation. Apparently the war has caused immeasurable damage to Venetia. Moving, we are cornered by a bunch of enemies. It takes a while, but after defeating them all, we can now explore the metro. First, we use the store key to enter one of the rooms. Here we can pick up the developer fluid and combine it with the developer tank to create a strange QR code image. Now, I did try to actually scan this QR code with my phone, but it didn't really lead me anywhere. People online even tried to redraw it and see if it actually leads anywhere, but it was a dead end. So don't try to scan it because it's not going to lead anywhere. I mean, you could try, but it's not going to do much. However, checking the store desk, we find a photo. On the right side, we see who we thought was Alina Seo, the person who we were searching for at the start of the game. The other person in the photo who we see, we will come to know as Lilith Ito, a relative of the people that run the bookstore, which we're going to enter soon. Reading the rest of the postcard, we see the names of everyone in them. Moving over to the cables hallway, the door to a clothing store is locked off, but the room leading to the package holding facility is open. Here we can now scan the QR code from our new device and open the locker. Inside, we find another card, the Sun card, but also a letter written by a person called Sun, who speaks of having to run away to whoever the letter is addressed to. She speaks of apparently the girl in white hair, most likely again Ariane, having been suspected of being a bioresonant, meaning she has some sort of powers. Now, working our way through some sketchy alleys, we find another magazine. This one talks of the phenomenon known as the Red Eye, basically an all-seeing eye that watches over the entirety of Rotfront, the planet. It is spoken of as being some sort of folklorish and made-up phenomenon that the first settlers of Rotfront believed in. However, an interesting term that is brought up here is pareidolia. Now, this is a real term that refers to finding meaning or seeing things where they don't exist. An example would be seeing a cloud shaped like a giant schlong and perceiving that as being something meaningful, while in reality it's just pure coincidence or has no logical explanation. Like imagining that you're seeing the shape of turtles in your French toast. Sure, is there perhaps a giant turtle god trying to send us a message, or perhaps your toaster is getting old? Using one of the alleyways, we return back and climb up to a new apartment. Inside, we fight off several corrupted replica, and on the wall is a poster of the orbital defense battery on Venetia, which is aimed straight at Buyan and Kitez. The next hallway has several rooms, the first of which is the butterfly room, containing 4 butterflies inside of a glass frame preserved with the title Pareidolia that we just spoke of. Underneath, possibly named this way because the patterns on the butterfly can sometimes seem to resemble objects, letters, or even words. The room also contains a giant safe, and the initial code on it says LSTR or Elster. On the table, we can find a note speaking of bioresonance. Interestingly, it seems that the Yusan Nation who have managed to create the replicas still don't even know themselves exactly how bioresonance works, or how to fully harness its power. Though they have used part of this power of bioresonance for climaforming planets, similar to how terraforming planets is something that we have proposed to do in our real world on like Mars. Now, to open the safe in the room, we need to look at those butterflies again, just a little closer. You may notice that they almost spell out the word Aeon, which, if you haven't figured out, is also the abbreviated name for the Yusan government. Typing it into the safe, we unlock it, and inside is a bunch of nasty-ass cocoons, which honestly freak me the fuck out. FYI, one of my friends actually has to deal with this shit in real life, as his girlfriend is a bug fanatic, which I would not be able to handle that. Either way, picking up the moon card inside, we can now move on. The end of the hallway features a dentist room, perhaps the same where Ariane might have had hers removed. Here, we can pick up a red diskette. Rushing through here, we can use the trash chute and make our way to the computer once more, this time putting in the red diskette. Here we have now an overview of each and every single person that has been treated in recent time, including 2 people that we need, Ito Erika and Ito Isolde, the daughters of the bookstore owners. Now, if we take their last numbers of their PKZ code, that being 560524, we can use that at their bookstore later. For now, however, we read some more entries. One of the entries is about Ariane herself. Her notes are basically redacted, but one thing that we do learn is that she's suffering from acromothritia, a disease where you start graying in the hair at a very early age. Something most of us will suffer from eventually, but it isn't really common in younger people, and individuals like Ariane. A lot of the other entries are also familiar. Some of them even look similar to a lot of the replicas. One of these is a man named Nguyen Nikolai, who looks oddly similar to Adler, but it's written that he is, well, seemingly a sketchy man. In the bookstore alleyway, we enter the birthday of the Ito sisters, 560524. This allows us access inside, and first we pick up a book, The Song of the Gods. It seems to be written in an interesting way. The book is banned, and as such, the stuff inside sounds odd. It speaks of the Empress, possibly the leader of the Empire, which Aeon is fighting so hard to get rid of. But it also seems that the Empress has bioresonant powers as well, which is a weird connection. Leaving the back room, we run into Issa, but as we speak to her, she melts away. after she's gone, right next to her is a book named Prometheus. For those of you who do not know, he is a titan in Greek mythology. Prometheus is known as the god of fire, but also the one who created mortals or humans, perhaps referring to the Empress once more and how she was pivotal in the creation of replicas since bioresonance was needed for that too, and bioresonance seems to stem from her somehow. Another book in the store speaks of how bioresonance can be used to twist and turn minds, altering things to the world, both consciously and unconsciously. They even ascribe a phenomena like remote viewing, doppelgangers, and even the poly effect, and say that all of these strange phenomena that just happen to occur and how they all could just be related to bioresonance. They're kind of using bioresonance as a way to say that it could explain phenomena that have no explanation. Kind of like how we have deja vu. We think a moment has actually happened, but it really hasn't. The corner holds two pictures. They are shrines. These often exist in Asian cultures as a way of remembering those who have passed. It is all starting to click together. One picture is of Ito Erika. The other is of Isolde Ito, or Isa. It would seem that both of them had passed away while being sent to war at Venetia. Before they were sent, they seem to have been close friends with Ariane, hence why Isa saw Ariane getting bullied back in one of those strange flashbacks on the Rotfront school. The card we find on their shrine is a grim one. It's the death card, pretty much confirming that they were dead. With all the cards in hand, we return to the atrium, but the place is far more now consumed by flesh once again, and on the ground, we can also see a dead Elster, alongside a dial ring right next to her. If we pick this ring up and put it into the giant solar map, we can now twist and turn the dial of Rotfront as well. Moving through the rest of this sector here, we'll now see that most rooms which we previously could enter have all been consumed by flesh. Using the patient key, we can enter room 512. Inside, there's way too much flesh growth, but at least the nearby table will allow us to finally solve another puzzle. First, we gotta read the book on the nightstand. This will give us riddles which we can use to solve the puzzle on the tarot cards. Having read all the different riddles and matched up all the cards in the right position, we can now use a blue light which shows us the exact phases that the planets need to be in back at the solar puzzle. So rushing downstairs, we can now go back and dive through the giant gaping hole after matching up all the planets together. Going through the tunnel, it reminds me of the same one used in Silent Hill 4 to travel from place to place. It also makes me wonder if Boofcan is ever going to drop that Silent Hill 4 video. Exiting the other side, however, it still holds the same room you guys may remember from the start of the game. Once again, the King in Yellow is here, but now everything makes far more sense. This room belonged to Ariane, which would explain all the books that she has here, which is the one she loves to read. The drawings on the wall are her paintings, and the radio device is just like the one she used back at the remote mountain radio station alongside her mother. The book on the table, The King in Yellow, has now had its final seal broken. It's time to go home. Taking the book, we can exit Ariane's room. We are in her aunt's apartment. Notes are thrown about everywhere here, and reading the first one, it's addressed to Ariane. Her aunt is telling her to leave space in her backpack for books that her uncle had ordered from the E2 bookstore. The second note is a worker order assignment sheet. It's a request by Ariane to be put into the Penrose program, aka Penrose 512, the spaceship which she and Elster ended up on at the end of the day. We can also see her work experiences here, one being her time with her mother on the weather station in Leng, the planet, and the others being the photo store work she did, as well as some time in Rotfront as a soldier. However, the biggest highlight is the last part. It says that if she is not to be accepted into the Penrose program, she would instead be sent to Sierpinski mining facility at Leng. The last thing we find is a letter from Ariane's mom, asking her to stay safe and not overwork herself, but also talking about someone in particular. It seems Ariane sent her a photo of a girl that she thought looked similar to her. Ariane's mother replies that she agrees, but that there isn't anyone in their family tree named Seo. And finally, you might have figured it out. Alina Seo, the person we're looking for at the start, wasn't actually the individual that Elster wanted to find. Rather, Alina Seo was related to the Ito sisters, and just because of how similar she looked to Ariane, it seems Ariane created a fantasy in her mind about the two of them possibly being related. I will take a moment later in the video to connect all of these dots as best as I can, but for now we leave the room for the final time. Heading up the long hallway, it holds massive amounts of notes. One by Adler, accepting that the reality itself that he's been inside of has been shifting and looping in on itself while twisting everything along the way. The second is a red dream, written by FALKE, the commander of Sierpinski. It seems FALKE also is suffering from this struggle of figuring out what part of reality is real and what part of her is actually her, twisting her into thinking she is Elster rather than being FALKE. The third note tells us to stop and turn back. Apparently, we have tried doing this many times and always failed. It's a final warning from Adler. The last note is FALKE's memories. Strangely, the note doesn't seem like it actually contains any of hers, but rather the memories of Elster, of her dancing with Ariane, of watching movies together and falling asleep together. Before entering the final door, we can once more see those paintings, the Isle of the Dead, as well as another one. Before leaving one last time, the room contains FALKE, commander and one of the strongest and most godlike of the replicas. It seems FALKE has been corrupted just like the rest, now thinking that she is Elster, and thinking that the love that Elster and Ariane felt is part of her feelings. And as such, she tries to fight us, leading into the game's final battle. Now, this is the game's hardest boss battle. FALKE will throw multiple spears, and if you dodge and pick her spears up, she'll then be stunned for a short period, allowing you to close in and get teleported to essentially the nowhere reality. And this is kind of a weird thing in the battle. You keep shifting between the real world, sort of, and this nowhere location that is more dark and grim. But also, you get swarmed by several other replicas at the same time when you're trying to battle her. This can make things a little bit more difficult. The battle as a whole can be hard at times, as you will run out of ammo and be constantly attacked by FALKE spears all the time. The battle takes place in several phases, but mostly it's just dodge and fire until the spears can be used to impale. Defeating her, she's been stabbed through the head several times with the spears that we kept picking up. She tells us that she considers us as one before she finally dies. We meet Adler at the top of the stairs of the Red Gate once again. He questions if we're able to go through all this once more. He pleads for us to turn back and stop this repeating cycle. However, when he tries to stab us, we take a knife to the eye, while he takes a bullet to the gut. And Elster continues. Once more, we're back in the Penrose. Going through it, we can read notes written by Ariane. Cycle 225 is a note by Ariane about wanting to get off Rotfront. It seems she simply hated her life there. The repetitive nature, the fake smiles, the people. The photo of Alina Seo, the soldier, made her question if she could have had a life like hers instead. This might be why Alina was the one Elster searched for at the start of the game. A weird fantasy that Ariane had of being Alina because she wanted her life. Cycle 684. Ariane gets more used to Elster, but she's starting to miss the connection with other people. Next is a Phase 3 note for the Penrose. This is where we learn that this mission had a certain parameter that wasn't clear from the start. This was a suicide mission. The plan was to send out the Penrose vessels across space to look for habitable planets. However, if a planet wasn't found, there wouldn't be a return plan. Rather, whoever was on board was expected to simply die over time due to life support systems failing. We also find another painting by Ariane, still not fully finished. Cycle 1294. Ariane here talks about the King in Yellow book. It seems she has read it, but unfortunately the book was banned and taken away, but she wanted to read more about it. Cycle 1840. Ariane is slowly losing herself in the ship. The nature of everything being the same is starting to warp her mind. Cycle 2503. Ariane is slowly dying off, more and more. The room we are in is the life support system, and we can see that it's turned toxic, probably poisoning everybody inside. The final notes of the cycle is Ariane fearing that either her or Elster won't be able to wake up again, and they won't be able to say goodnight anymore to each other. It's her fearing death and freaking out about it. In the living quarter, we see Elster's actual body, talking to it, Elster just simply says she wasn't able to keep her promise. In the end, she also got sick. With nothing left to see, it's time to enter the cryo chamber. Alright, now I have to explain real quick here. What you're about to witness is the game's endings, but you have to know that there are several different ones, and I'll start the endings in the order which I got them, beginning with what's known as the promise ending. In this one, Elster finds Ariane in the cryogenics chamber, laying in the pod. Ariane begs Elster to keep their promise. But eventually, she completes their promise and ends Ariane's life by suffocation. She stays by Ariane's side until she succumbs to her wounds and dies as well. An interesting note about this ending is that it almost looks like this is where the fake ending that we completed earlier in the game actually ends, or rather begins, as Elster seems to enter inside and we find the dead Elster with the armor, which she then takes the arms off, meaning that this is a continual loop that keeps reoccurring. Next we have the leave ending. It's a bit different and features Elster being unwilling to enter the cryogenics chamber and instead leaves the ship and even removes her armor plating while walking the planet's surface, eventually collapsing and dying. This ending seems to lean more towards the cycle of the loop, where Elster simply gives up, just like the other Elsters we have found leading up to the Penrose ship after confronting Adler. These are versions of Elster that just couldn't make it all the way. They couldn't keep the promise because taking the life of Ariane would just be too painful. Memory ending is the last regular ending in the game. In Memory, Elster finds Ariane inside a cryogenics pod once more. However, this time Ariane is unable to remember Elster or their promise. Her memory has been wiped, so instead of taking her life, Elster simply succumbs to her wounds, while Ariane remains alive. This ending could also, just like the promise ending, be one of the cycles where Elster, from the fake ending, picks up the armor and continues the mission. There's also an order that could be viewed for each of these endings, but we will talk about that possibly a bit later. It's a little bit hard to figure out. However, the way you could actually get these different endings is quite interesting. See, the game doesn't have one single decision or choice that decides what ending you get. Instead, the system for the endings works similarly to that of Silent Hill 2. The decisions you make during the game will garner you a certain amount of points, and you gain these points based on certain actions. If you kill or don't kill enemies, if you talk to certain NPCs, or if you ignore them. Hell, even your gameplay time and how long you play the game for will also affect the outcome, as having a long playtime will literally make a difference. This is a great system as it forces multiple playthroughs with a variety of gameplay styles for you to get all the different endings. At the end, you even get a final game screen that shows you what ending you got, as well as how long you've played for. However, the one ending we have yet to speak about is arguably the strangest in all of Signalis. It is called the Artifact ending. What makes it so different and unlike the others which we have spoken about is that all the other ones are possible to get from the start of your journey on your first playthrough. However, the Artifact ending is more of an ARG or alternate reality game, meaning that we will have to go beyond the game itself to solve this one. Luckily, a bunch of fantastic internet detectives from the Signalis community have done this already, so let's start. Now, you may remember when we picked up our radio, there was often locations in which random sounds could be played or heard when we turned it on. On my first playthrough, I assumed these random noises were simply there to mess with the player or to use against the corrupted Colibri. However, that isn't the case. The sounds you're hearing is what's known as an SSTV, also known as a slow scan television, a picture transmission method in which you turn an image into sounds. Now, to show you an example of this, I have taken this picture of my mascot Pepe and used a web SSTV encoder that turns the Pepe into the following sound. Now, if I then use a decoder, we will get the following image back. So right, that makes sense, right? Now, using this, we can walk around different locations all around Signalis to these hidden SSTV signals, which can then be decoded. Now, if we decode the sound from 96 frequency using the SSTV, it will show us this. Now, you might recall towards the start of our journey, we encountered a room filled with bodies being watched over by corrupted storage. So, well, setting our radio module to 96, we can interact with the cage here and find the key of love. This is one of the 3 keys that we need to get our hands upon. And this might be a good time to tell you that this ending will need you to go through a second playthrough. That is mainly because the game doesn't actually reveal these frequencies in the right order. This is because you might hear the sound of the first key, but it's going to show up much later in the game. Or you hear the sound of the second key, but it shows up early in the game. So basically, it's a little bit complicated, but you're not even able to return to pick them up if you already passed a certain point. The second key is the key of eternity. When decoding the sound of it, while on the 8th floor, setting the module to 65, it can be found in the bookshelf at the STCR room, back at the 7th floor. Last is the key of sacrifice. It's only obtainable back at the Rotfront chapter inside the bookstore's back room. Setting the frequency to 240 Hz and interacting with the bookcase, you'll find it. With all the keys in your inventory, you're now able to use them on the giant box inside of Ariane's bedroom that we first entered when we exited the Penrose at the beginning of the game. However, to do this, you need all the keys on you before going through the final hole in Rotfront. So, literally a warning here. If you go through the big hole like in Silent Hill 4, if you don't have the keys with you, you're not going to be able to do this. Next, we can use the keys on the giant safe. We need to also enter a code, and much smarter people than me figured out that the code for this is the same code that has been seen several times throughout the game. The same code that can be heard whenever the 3-note oddity is played. If you recall, the lady will read out a set of numbers in German, and if we jot down those numbers from the screen here, we can finally open the safe. Inside, we'll see some white lilies, and if you happen to recall, we also saw similar ones at the Penrose after the fake ending. Picking them up gives us the lily ending, or the artifact ending. Here we watch as Elster puts the lilies on top of an altar before falling and dying. All around us, we can also see other Elsters, but their armor is slightly different to ours each time, featuring other colors which we haven't seen before. In the middle, a giant gem appears. Slowly, we see as a giant red eye watches from above. On the ground, Elster and Ariane are dancing, while Swan Lake plays in the background. This is arguably the game's best ending, as the last thing we get to see are Elster and Ariane happy together, doing their final dance forever. Now, to understand this ending, we need to take a look at a few things. First of all, any explanation that I can give can be brought into question, and that is one of the beautiful things about Signalis. It's a game without 100% clear answers, and the developers have stated numerous times that it's all up for interpretation, and you can kind of look at the game through different and your own lens. Now, all the extra things we have had to do to get this ending, and the fact that lilies were present leads me to the possibility that this ending is some sort of rebirth. The reason I say this is the white lilies themselves. They represent purity and are present at both weddings and even funerals. Another thing is the King in Yellow. Now, this book has been present throughout the entire game, and it's kind of served as an underlying vehicle to set up certain themes. Now, in the King in Yellow, there is a short story called The Mask. In this specific short story, there is an attempt to create a resurrection potion of sorts to revive a loved one. This ending feels like the least painful one, using the red eye mentioned in the newspapers and Rotfront to almost give off this feeling of an otherworldly god watching from above, while Ariane and Elster have their final dance, with this feeling like the most conclusive and happy ending of sorts. I mean, even the text above the safe where we get the lily has the German text, "If only we could live forever as we do now," implying that this ending is the exact feeling Elster and Ariane felt when they were the happiest together. And the lily ending is their final dance, their final moment of joy and love as they spend it together. Alrighty, so now to summarize Signalis as far as I could tell, and the interpretation of the game which I feel spoke most to me, is that of a person seeking true freedom. Ariane in our story is someone who loves freedom, America, and of course the freedom to read whatever book she wants to, the freedom to explore the world and go places she's never seen before. However, she lives in a world akin to our own, but in a more dystopian and totalitarian nation where her individuality is pushed to the bottom. So whenever she has a chance to let it out, she does. Hence why in the game she loves to draw, read, and listen to music. When we see Ariane on the train sequence, for example, she's lonely. The moment might at first feel like it's supposed to be creepy, like, ooh, what a creepy horror moment with a girl disappearing, but watching it a second time around, you realize it's more sad than anything. Ariane's alone, and that's how she feels in this world. She feels just watched and non-stop shunned and hated, and this train is her one moment of solitude, being alone all over again, but without anybody watching over her. She's most likely on her way to another day of mundane life, or on her way to the Penrose program. It's pretty clear she hates all of this, to the point that she decides to leave on what is most likely going to be a suicide mission, the Penrose program. However, from the tidbits in the story that we can see, we can figure out that Ariane has bioresonance. So on top of already hating the nation she lives in, she also has something which will make her suspicious and feared by everyone around her. And the stress of all that causes her so much damn harm that she starts to get sick, turning her hair white. And on top of it all, she gets bullied. And when the suggestion of her going to Sierpinski facility back at Leng comes up, she literally decides that death out in space is much better than being a prisoner at this place. The entire game's premise feels like that of someone wanting to get away from everything. The game, just like The King in Yellow, starts as a horror game, but eventually leads into a love story, and you start realizing that things aren't the way they were meant to be. Ariane is now on the Penrose, and she falls in love with Elster. She can basically do whatever she wants to, because she's no longer in the grasp of the nation. Or at least she thinks she isn't. But at least being here allows her to fall in love and create a bond with someone who seems to actually like her back. But again, the grasp of the nation still reaches her even this far into space. The rules state that if life support goes out on the vessel, that the replica must kill their gestalt to reduce their suffering. But Ariane doesn't want to die, and Elster doesn't want to kill her. And in all of this, the bioresonance that she has starts to seep out, affecting the world around her and causing the events of the game to take place. Her powers are akin to that of an eldritch god from like Lovecraft's books. The Dreamer, for example, someone who can bend reality in the world itself simply by dreaming of things. And each time the dreamer moves in their sleep, the world quite literally shifts. And if we take into account that she was bioresonant, and the bioresonance is amplified by the help of the Penrose ship, it could be reaching far away, affecting the real Sierpinski facility, or perhaps the Sierpinski we see is just conjured up in her mind. Either way though, the people we see there are all people that have existed in Ariane's mind or memory in one way or another. A lot of the people we witness in Sierpinski are similar to individuals that Ariane knew from her regular life back at Rotfront. One of them is Isa. Another one would be Alina Seo, someone who Ariane wanted to be like, someone who was a good soldier and seemed happy, and she wished she was more like her. And there are moments in the game where we actually get to see that they kind of are the same person, or at least there are moments where it seems like they're the same person. I'll talk a bit more about this in a moment, but again, even locations like the Nowhere feature this sort of element. The whole place looks like a cancerous growth, probably because Ariane in her mind is slowly dying away from a disease, taking her little by little, rotting away at her. And as she slowly dies, the loop that Elster is stuck in with Ariane just gets more and more corrupted. Speaking of Elster, she herself is doomed to eternally keep repeating the task of trying to keep her promise to Ariane. But even the task of killing Ariane is one that lacks any form of freedom. Killing her would just be following the orders of the nation, hence why the best ending in the game is the secret artifact ending. In that one, Elster makes some kind of a deal, and some sort of power that be, in return, lets her and Ariane dance forever in an endless dream. Again, my interpretation is that of someone looking to get away from the grasp of all the people around them, and also just get away from a government that seems to push them down. And honestly, there's so much more in the game that could symbolize different things that I'm going to be honest, that could be a whole video on its own. And that's kind of the interesting thing about Signalis. The more you dig, the deeper it gets. And the deeper it gets, the more you start losing yourself and forgetting where you even started from. For one, for example, is the ever-present number 6. For example, 6 sides in the game's logo, 6 spots in the inventory, 6 floors to explore, 6 pillars in the artifact ending. Does it mean anything? Honestly, I don't know, but there are a lot of numbers and sort of esoteric signals in this game that exist, which you may not always understand, and the more you try to dig into them, the more you realize that there is another layer underneath the first 3 layers, and that's kind of the cool thing about the game, but eventually it's going to make you lose your fucking mind. Another thing is that this game clearly takes a lot from our real world. The fact that they use the 3-note oddity, a lot of German text and even German flags, which obviously, yes, because the developers are German, but they also use a lot of propaganda posters, something that gives off this East German vibe during Soviet occupation. Also, it's the fact that it's a police state where freedoms are limited, and even the sharing of knowledge or IDs is considered treason. Hell, there are so many references and connections in this game, it would honestly take forever to describe them all. Take, for example, Sierpinski Station 23, for example. 23 could refer to the 23 Enigma, which is a belief in that the number 23 holds a massive significance and is used to referring to something that holds a larger or more hidden significance itself. The entire game is like this. The entire game has more hidden significance hidden within it. For one is the fact that each replica seems to have a strange connection to each other. One of these would, for example, be Ariane. Ariane has a weird connection to FALKE, and I don't know exactly why, but it is possible that FALKE is based on the neural pathway of the daughter of the Empress. And why am I bringing up the Empress? Well, because the Empress herself seems to have a daughter that looks oddly similar to Ariane as well. They are kind of similar in design, and it doesn't end there. Looking at FALKE during the fake ending, if you look at a picture of her and then an image of Ariane, they are bloody identical, making me wonder if FALKE and Ariane are literally related. And that also leaves the question of who exactly is Elster herself in all of this. Who is her Gestalt? Well, we can kind of figure that out by watching the fake ending one more time. In it, we'll be seeing flashing images, and if we slow them down, we can see Alina Seo. Again, she's on a bridge overlooking Veneta as it's being bombarded. The lake we often see in the regular endings is present here as well, but one interesting thing that appears here is the pillars from the artifact ending. We see what seems to be the mother of the Toe sisters arriving at her daughter's, Alina's, grave, where she leaves lilies to commemorate her daughter's passing, but also as a way to accept her passing. And just like how Elster has to accept Ariane's passing in the artifact ending, but there's also another thing here, and that's gotta be this image of Lilith. She is injured in the eye, and you may recognize that this looks identical to the eye of Elster. She got stabbed in the eye the same way, and we know also from the photo of Alina alongside Lilith that, well, she passed away eventually. So, is that Elster's original Gestalt? I don't know. For a long time, I thought the actual Gestalt of Elster was Alina for whatever reason, but that's not the case. Again, this Elster connection here is not 100% guaranteed. It's all speculation, but it's the best that can be summarized from the game. And this is where my conclusion comes. The story is open for interpretation and at times can be confusing. I had to play the entire game several times to finally get even a slightly more clear image of it. But that's kind of the fantastic part of this game. No matter how much you dig, there is always more. The game is like a bug that digs itself into your mind and you keep thinking about it non-stop. And that's what I did. It was constantly on my mind. I would non-stop be thinking about Signalis to the point that I honestly got frustrated with the game because I wanted to know, what is the real ending? Where is it all taking place? Is it real? Is it a dream? Is it not? Every time you try to look at the game and you think something is one way, then it could be the other way, but you won't know until you dive deeper. But if you dive deeper, you're gonna get stuck. And that is Signalis for you. And that is my conclusion. This is a game that will break you. It will take you apart and put you back together and leave you confused, happy, sad, and honestly, like I said at the start of the video, with a scent of dread. But at the end of the day, it's all a game about sad lesbian space robots. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll be seeing you guys the next time. Feel free to subscribe if you want to, and I will launch you into an eternal, never-ending nightmare loop.